when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go.
Hello. Today we're going to jump into Pseudo-Class Selectors, and I'm going to do a short intro on the image element. Yesterday or last time we talked about combinator selectors, and this kind of goes down that path of looking at CSS selectors and looking at group selectors, combinator selectors, pseudo-class selectors. We're going to get into pseudo-element selectors and attribute selectors now. Today, this is pseudo-class selectors. And the very first one we're going to focus on is location pseudo-classes and user action pseudo-classes. There's more than the 7 that are here, but what we have is link, visited, hover, active, first child, last child, and nth child, and those are the main ones that we're going to use. The reason that we are focusing on those ones is they're more commonly used than the other ones, but there are plenty more for you to check out, so just be informed of that. Our location pseudo classes, when we focus here, we're talking about our anchor tag. We have link and visited, and these are states of that anchor element, which we've discussed in the past, which is a hyperlink. It's a link to a destination, right? So that link can be styled with these pseudo classes by targeting the anchor that is in a particular state, and then we do the style for that thing. So in this case, this is something that has not been visited. By default, it's blue, and we can choose to make it something different. By default, a visited link, one that we have clicked on before, is purple. And then you have user actions, which are when the user hovers over or when the user is actively clicking. Like when I actively click down, you can see a yellow dot around my cursor that basically shows I am actively clicking in an active state, and then they styled that yellow dot based on that active state. And you can do the same thing for a hyperlink when somebody is putting their cursor over that or when they're actively clicking down on it. And by default, a hover turns the cursor into a finger, and the active state when actively clicking will highlight the item red. And we can kind of adjust those, and you'll see that in this video. Then the tree structural pseudo classes. This is going to be an interesting conversation. Just to start, it's just very simply the tree is the way that the document is organized. So let's very quickly take a look at what that means. We have our original document here, our original index, and inside of the body we have this div, which is a child of that body. But inside that div we have an anchor tag, which is a child of that div, which is a child of that body. And so what the tree is it's an organization of how that's laid out. And that way we can target based on that element layout, whether it's a child of something, or the first child, the last child of something, or which child it is of that particular thing that it's a child of. We can target those types of elements in that way. That'll become more evident as we move on, but I just want to give you just a very brief crash course information on that. Now, what we have here, let's go ahead and take a look, is our bookmark brings us down to that pre-tag, and then we scroll down and we had that refresh that brings us up. We've seen how to create a new web page. I'm just going to hold Command so it doesn't open it in this window, and then that brings us back home. But we've seen a way to link to new pages, and we do have that newer page. We're going to create another one here, but I want to give an easy way to access all of this information. And but we're going to keep it very simple. We're not going to style it in any special way. But for now, I just want to go ahead and create something that gives us access to every page that we have, including this new page that we're about to build. So the very first one is the anchor element.html page. We want access to that. And then we're going to also do another one here, and we're going to do the image element, because that's something that we're going to be targeting next. And then we're going to say image element. Whoop. Now that's yelling at me because I haven't actually made that yet, so let's go ahead and do that. And we're going to right click HTML file, and we're going to add in the image element.html. And now that exists, and it exists in the file, so now that that little error will go away. And we have this in here. Let's go ahead and do a couple things. One, let's rename this to image element tab, and we'll do an H1 that's images, and then we will link in image element.css, which again doesn't exist, so let's go ahead and make that. Style sheet image element.css, and now it exists inside the same folder, so that is cured. And just to make sure everything's being targeted, let's give that H1 a text decoration of underline. Now, let's also, we won't mess with these too much, but as a matter of fact, is that in its own anchor element, image element? Okay, so they're across the top, there's just no space between them and that bookmark. That's okay for now. Okay, so we have our anchor element and our image element. And so now we can link to either one of those pages. Right now we're focused on the image, so we see that our images is there, and it does have that underline, so everything appears to be connected appropriately. Now, that said, we can take this very same thing and we can copy it into each one of these pages. In each one of these HTML pages, anchor element and image element. And by the way, we're going to clean up this folder here in the near future, so this isn't as confusing or obscure. So in any case, what we could do is we could take this div that we made those and then stick them in each one of the HTML bodies at the top, and we can link them to the correct pages so that one links to all the others. And then what you have is a basic navigation bar, which we will build a better one in the future, but just for now, just so you know. And let's go ahead and also very quickly give this a home, and we'll give it back to the index.html, and we'll call that the home button. And it's just a very simple let's save, refresh, home button. And that way we can get back and forth to where we want to navigate throughout what looks like a pretty messy site right now. So it's not like eye candy yet, but it is still going to, you know, get you where you want to be, as far as you can see, like for now, where the path is headed, right? So anyway, I'll try and abbreviate what I want to say there because I think you understand. Now, the next part, we're going to go ahead and talk about making an image as a hyperlink. So let's look at that. Image as a hyperlink. We have a hyperlink. We're just going to, for simplicity, give it the refresh, and actually let's give it a target of blank just to prove that, you know, everything's working. And we'll say this will be a image. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and also introduce image. Oops. Image. Okay. Now, this has a source. A source is a lot like an href, and except for an href points to a destination of where we want to go, whereas a source is going to point to a destination of where we want to pull something in. Usually media is specifically what we're talking about, which is music, video, image, some, you know, GIF, whatever. That's that type of media. It's usually going to point to that source of media. Now, if you use Control-Shift-4, you get this little nifty thing that takes an image, and I already did that, so I'm going to throw that one away. And I called it screensnag.png. So that's what I want to point to. It's inside of the same file as my other stuff. And if you do the same thing, or any image that you stick in there should work, as long as you have the correct name of that image. And if not, go into your file system or use this to rename. You can go edit, rename, and or Command R or however. But the point is, rename it so that it's easy for you to actually grab in here. Because if it's not, if you leave it as whatever the computer automatically gives it a name of, it could be real complicated and harder to grab. So anyway, alt and image. Okay, so alt is text that says, for a screen reader and for other reasons. It's going to give us information that we need, and I'm not going to go into too much detail of this image, but just to give you a quick look at what this looks like. Whoops. We can do two things. One, let's take a look at it now, and we have this will be an image, and there's our image, and so you can see our hyperlink and our image are right next to each other. Now, if I take out the actual image, and then I go back and I refresh, now it says an image, which is the text right here if for any reason their screen doesn't pick up that there's a source, or something like that happens. But if we go back, whoops, wrong button there, refresh, not tap. Okay, and then we have our image back, and if you have somebody with accessibility issues, then that image is not available to them. They're going to get the information in that alt text. So, that's a little crash on that image, and that's about all the further we're going to get into detail on the image in this video. Let's go ahead and focus back in on the pseudo selectors. That's the main point of this particular video. So what I want to do is give this image, instead of having those two things separate, I'm going to take this image and I'm going to put it inside where I said this will be an image. And I'm also going to split that off, so anywhere where one element ends, I want to kind of shove it forward a little bit, make it an apparent child inside of my visual tree, that way I don't lose it as somebody who needs to go back and read my code again eventually. I want to be able to very clearly see, okay, this is a child of that, whereas when it's all on one line, it's not very clear. So now we have our image as a hyperlink. So you can see here that we refresh the page, and now this, as you can see, my finger is turning, or my cursor is turning into a finger. And if I click it, it's going to refresh the page, but you can see each time it's opening up in a new tab, and the reason, as we discussed before, is that blank target. So every time I click on this, it's going to open up a new window, and Command W is going to be how I close those. So it's working, and that image is now a hyperlink. And we're going to go ahead and we want to see a hyperlink on its own. That way, and maybe even a couple of those, and an image on its own. And the image can be screen snag.png all the time. And for now, we're just going to leave the alt X. And we're going to make a few of those every time. Now, this is our basic setup. If we refresh our page, we can see each one of our images, and then our hyperlinks are also sitting off to the side. And I've given you a crash reason on that before. Basically, this doesn't sit next to this because it is what's known as a block level tag, and these are all inline level tags. And when you have an inline tag next to an inline, they try and go inline next to each other as far as they can, as far as the screen will allow. So if I go ahead and shrink my screen, if I'm able, as soon as the screen can't fit in anymore, then it forces itself down to its own line. And so it takes up as much room as it can, but this next image can't sit over here, so it forces itself down to that next line. What we want to do is we want to automatically make all images, let's go ahead and make all images, and we're going to target all links, and we want all them to be display block. So let's refresh, and now every single thing has its own line, every single one. we're also going to give it a margin bottom, which you've seen, of just a simple 10 pixels. So let's refresh and see that. And now we can see each individual item for itself. And now we can start to look at how to target those things individually. Let's go ahead and give the first one a look. The first thing that I want to target here is a link. And how this works, again, this is the pseudo class here, link. But we're targeting the anchor tag that has not been visited, and we want to color it green. Now if we look over here, you can see these are purple because I've already visited them. So let's go ahead and make a very quick tag that I have not visited. We'll change this one to be https nevervisited.com. Okay. Now if I refresh this, you can see I've never visited that, and I'm not going to click on it just in case it's a weird link that takes me somewhere I do not want to be. But you can see that this is going to be now styled as something I've never visited and something I have visited, and we can start to see those differences. And so now with that link, it should be green, and you can see, oh, this one is green. This second one, the one I haven't visited, now that I'm looking a little bit closer. The first one's purple, which shows that I have visited, and actually it's the second one that's now green that shows that I haven't. And just to prove it, I can comment out this code, and then when I go back and I refresh, and now it's blue as it should be. And so when I uncomment this and go back and refresh, now it's green again because I've now targeted an unvisited link and made it green. So let's continue that. And we're going to make all of our visited links orange. So let's take a look at how that would affect. Boom, just like that, it's orange. Boom. Next, we have hover. And hover is going to make our background color dark blue. So let's take a look at that. We'll refresh, and when we hover, our background becomes dark blue. So now we have our unvisited green, our visited orange, and our background hover of dark blue. Finally, let's go crazy for active. When we're clicking down on this thing, let's make it kind of cool and crazy. And also let's get rid of this blank so it quits opening new tabs on us. So we're going to remove that target now that we've verified it that it worked. And we're going to go back here, and for active anchor elements, when it's being clicked down on, that user action is going to make the color white, the background dark red, the padding 20 pixels, and text align center, so it'll take it from the left to the center. And let's see that in action. Now I have the normal actions of each one of these, and you can see this one here gets that background, and it doesn't change as far as active or inactive as far as any coloring because it's an image, but what can be impacted is, and that's why I wanted to have this separate as an image versus these other hyperlinks. But the focus is more on the pseudo class, so you know we'll dig into each thing and unpack it as time allows us to. But let's go ahead and see what this looks like. When I click down, all of a sudden you can see there's a difference here, right? Same thing here. Boom, on its own. On its own. Whoop. I didn't mean to click that one. Okay, so let's go back, and site can't be reached. Thank goodness it wasn't something bad. And now I've refreshed, and on its own it's still showing as green, maybe because the site didn't actually let me reach it. Couldn't reach it, so maybe it's going to stay green, and that's perfect for me. But that gives you a pretty good idea of those ones. So let's go ahead and jump back over into, where am I going here with this? The tree structural pseudo classes. Now these can be tricky, so let's go ahead and get some new examples. in this section, we're going to go past that div, and we're going to create a new div with an h2 in it. I'm going to call it first, last, and nth. And that way we can address first, last, and nth pseudo-classes. So in this section, I'm going to have a bunch of different images. And in all of these, I'm going to have to rename them to screen snag.png, and same thing here. Whoops, one too many. Screen snag.png to appropriately name it. Okay, and then we're going to do first, last, nth. I've got a bunch of images, and then within a section, I've got a bunch of images, so we can see what the difference is between those. Now, let's start out with first child. And what we can do is we can say image, the first child, if it's an image, let's change the height to 150 and the width to 300 pixels, change the size of that image. So let's see how this works in action. And we're going to come back here to see, you know, what's going on really. Now, we have this one right here change, and we have this one right here change. So why did it change those particular two? Well, let's talk about first child. That is targeting when this particular element, this image, is a first child of something. And when is it a first child? Well, let's see. We have an image right here, which is the first child of a hyperlink. So we have a hyperlink, and that image happens to be the first child. But you look down here at these three just beneath that, and they are not, even though this is technically the first image child of this div, it doesn't qualify because it's not the first child inside of the div. If instead we took this image and we moved it, whoops, wrong thing. We moved it, let's try that again. Up here as the first child of the div, and then we went back and refreshed, now it would be affected. So let's undo that. Okay. Now, here we have an H2 and an image. If we deleted the H2, that image would indeed be affected. So we can see that if we comment it out, and then we can say, okay, first, last, and so that'll go away, and this will turn into an affected image. And so that's how that basically works, is you're saying, okay, is this image the first child of something? Now that includes the body. So if the body has one of these, and I just say CV, whoops, and inside the body now, we go back and we look all the way up at the top. Now, this one right here is going to be affected because it is the first child of the body. And as a first child, that's when it can be affected. Now, obviously, last child is going to be exactly the same in reverse. So let's see what that looks like. And what we can do is display. Instead of display, what can we do with an image? Not too much. There's not a lot that we can do with an image without digging into more detail. So I'm just going to change the height and width of this one again, except for this one I'm going to make very weird. I'm going to say height 100 pixels, and then width, we'll say 75%. And let's refresh and take a look. Which ones have been affected? last child. It doesn't appear that any have been affected. Well, let's see, last child. What should be affected? So if we're looking, this image is the last child, and this image. So maybe the effect isn't noticeable enough. So let's try, instead of 75%, we're going to say 800 pixels. And instead of 100, we're going to say 50, so it's even more of a drastic way to notice. There we go. And now you can see each one that's been the last child of something, including down here, can be affected in that way. Now, what about nth child? So let's see a couple of things we can do here. So nth child. If we have what we put in here can vary how this ends up looking. And if we say, for example, let's make this really obviously small, 50 by 50. It'll be just a little tiny box. And what we want to do is target the anytime something is the second child, then that's when we're going to target it. So if we refresh, now you can see that this is the second child of something, and this is the second child of something. And if you go in here, you can see anytime inside this div, we have first child as an h2, second child as an image. And so if we moved this one up and made it the second child, save that, and then refresh, you can see that that was now affected. But we're going to set that back, save it. And anytime it is a second child, so in this case right here it's a second child, in this case right here it is a second child of this particular section, this image is of a child of this div, a second child of that div, and on. And so you can see exactly what I mean when I do that. But let's go ahead and change that to the word even and save. And now every other one is going to be affected. Every second child, as long as it is the second, fourth, sixth child of the item. So hopefully you kind of get the trend that's going on here. And then same thing for odd. And now we just switched which ones were which. So that's basically how you can do that. And then there's some other values that you can give this. And again, without going into too much detail here, you can do like if I recall, if I'm doing this right, n+4, and it's going to give you some different results depending on what you do. And we're not going to go into all the detail on all that just yet, but we will eventually unpack that. Again, I wanted to just give you a view of like some different ways that we can target various different things inside of our project. So this is something that you can play with and leave off however you'd like in your own videos, but give yourself plenty to mess around with, and that will really cover it for an introduction to the images, but also really cover the basic most common pseudo-class selectors that you're going to find yourself using. And just knowing these is going to really help you be more specific when you're talking about specificity, and you start going in here and you're targeting a bunch of different stuff, and your application is getting huge, and you're starting to target, you don't have multiple pages of CSS. It can become real cumbersome to like not interfere with each other's, and we'll also go over some of those. I'll have a video of little gotchas that maybe you're trying to target this thing and you're overriding it with this other thing without realizing that you're even doing it. So there's a couple of those that we're going to go over, and I'll create an eventual video that covers all that content. But I appreciate you stopping in for this slightly longer video, and I will catch you guys in the next one. See ya.